Benjamin Franklin. Walter Isaacson, who is portrayed on the $100 bills. When you hear the name Benjamin Franklin, what comes to your mind first? Politics, science, or literature? The truth is that Franklin can be identified with all of these, yet he is none of them. Benjamin Franklin was one of the most successful and charismatic founding fathers of the United States. He was both a creative scientist and a powerful diplomat. He was a pioneer of social reforms and also a renowned writer. In this booklight, we intend to get to know the man whose image has appeared on $100 bills for nearly 2 centuries, the man about whom George Washington said, "There are 3 men I admire in my life. The first is Benjamin Franklin, the second is Benjamin Franklin, and the third is still Benjamin Franklin." The book, The Benjamin Franklin, paints a vivid portrait of the life of this charismatic legend, a winding story of an ordinary citizen who became one of the most significant figures in his book. We not only learn about Franklin's life, but also become familiar with the history of America itself. This book stands as a document of the difficult journey of America in transforming from 13 indigenous colonies into an independent nation. Moreover, we come to understand Franklin's prominent role in guiding America toward independence and establishing a national system of governance. As you read this book, you deeply feel as if a wise old man is calmly and honestly recounting his life to you. The narration of Benjamin Franklin is crafted so that the reader can sense his emotions, conflicts, and inner struggles. One of the most captivating aspects of the book, the boy who became a fish. The Franklins were a middle-class family who lived on the outskirts of England in the late Middle Ages, but Josiah, Benjamin Franklin's father, decided to leave England and move to America to improve his family's situation. Of course, when we speak of America, we are not referring to today's free and independent country. Medieval America was a colonized land in North America. Migration was not very fortunate for the small Franklin family. Josiah's first wife died a few days after their arrival in America. After this event, Josiah married his second wife, Benjamin Franklin's mother. All of Franklin's ancestors were craftsmen. His grandfather, Thomas II, was a master at repairing and restoring old objects. He made himself an extraordinary clock, one that never broke and worked perfectly accurately for the rest of his life. In fact, the Franklin family's genius was hereditary, clearly visible in Benjamin's youth. He was an absolute prodigy. Franklin's childhood was spent by the Charles River. He loved swimming. Benjamin was always looking for a way to swim faster. He thought about it so much that he eventually realized that the size of a person's hands and feet affects swimming speed. So young Franklin made himself fins similar to those of a fish. These fins greatly increased his speed and allowed him to swim across Boston Harbor. Josiah, Franklin's father, owned a soap-making shop in Boston. He hoped Benjamin would help him with the business. But Benjamin hated the smell of that shop. The process of making soap and candles had a terrible odor, and he soon told his father he couldn't stand working there. Josiah couldn't overpower his teenage son, so he decided to take Benjamin to various workshops to see what interested him. Together they visited almost all the workshops in Boston, and this sparked Benjamin's deep fascination with artisans. He became acquainted firsthand with handicrafts and discovered he had an excellent talent for repairing and restoring objects, just like his grandfather. Benjamin Franklin's most important principle was pragmatism, a rule that flowed through every aspect of his life. As a printer, there were no typesetting tools available in the country, so he tried to make lead molds himself and invented something similar to a type machine. Though type machines had been created years earlier elsewhere in the world, it can be said Franklin was the first person to manufacture one in America. Another of Franklin's remarkable creations was a proper press machine. The printing house where Franklin worked had a license to print notes. The copper press ensured that banknotes were printed differently from other papers, meaning counterfeit bills could no longer be produced. Throughout all his inventions, Benjamin remained true to his practical spirit. He always tried to create things that made life easier. For instance, he invented a device that reduced stove smoke and built a mechanical arm capable of moving objects from upper shelves to the floor. Most notably, Franklin invented bifocal glasses, which enabled people with vision problems to see from both near and distant ranges. Franklin gradually immersed himself in scientific research. His first investigations began during his voyage from London to Philadelphia, where he performed several interesting experiments on crabs found among seaweed. He then decided to measure his distance from London based on astronomical principles. After that, he studied the lives of dolphins, fish, and birds in Philadelphia. This journey marked the beginning of scientific inquiries that he continued for the rest of his life. The strange thing about this genius was his lack of focus on a single field. He conducted valuable research on ocean currents, meteorology, magnetism, and many other areas. However, his studies were never just for academic reading. Benjamin always sought practical uses for his discoveries. For instance, when he found that dark colors absorb more heat, he advised against wearing black clothes in hot and sunny climates. He tried to uncover the causes of diseases such as the common cold and suggested methods of prevention. Franklin also studied the duration and standard techniques of physical exercise, becoming the first to identify the connection between exercise and calorie burning. Surprisingly, he even proposed theories on eliminating nightmares. Even after entering the world of politics, Benjamin Franklin continued his scientific pursuits whenever he could. On one official trip to negotiate with Britain, he astonished his companions by constantly showing curiosity toward various phenomena along the way. Although Franklin's inventions and scientific discoveries were not limited to these examples, perhaps one of his most significant investigations was his study of fire. In Franklin's time, electricity was viewed by people as a magical force, but Benjamin Franklin transformed electricity from a mystery into a science. Lightning is not the work of the gods. Benjamin Franklin was the first person to realize that electric current is not magical, that lightning is not a punishment from God, and that this terrifying force is actually the flow of a fluid-like substance between positive and negative poles. Franklin demonstrated this idea in his famous kite experiment during a storm. He wanted to prove that lightning is produced by electricity. To do this, Franklin built a simple kite. He tied a copper wire to its frame so it could act as a lightning conductor. At the lower end of the kite, he attached a hemp string and connected a silk thread to the end of the hemp cord. But what was the purpose of this setup? Benjamin knew that hemp string becomes conductive when wet from rain. Therefore, he attached the silk thread so he could hold the kite safely. The silk thread was not supposed to get wet because Franklin stood under a roof while conducting his experiment. The final piece of the puzzle was a metal key. He hung the key from the hemp string and then, with the help of his son, released the kite into the air. They waited for a long time, but nothing happened. Franklin began to lose hope until something astonishing occurred. He noticed the hemp cord stiffening and taking on the form of a wire, as though electric current were flowing through it. Franklin carefully moved his finger toward the key attached to the string. The negative charge flowing through the metal key was attracted to the positive charge in Franklin's hand, and he felt a spark strike his finger. But is this story true? Did Franklin really discover electric current through a lightning strike during that experiment? The truth is that this experiment was extremely dangerous, and doubts remain about how he managed to perform such a risky act or whether he even did it himself. Nevertheless, no one questions the fact that Benjamin Franklin invented the lightning rod. If you look at tall buildings in cities, you'll notice sharp rods installed on their roofs to prevent lightning damage. During a storm, these pointed rods absorb the electrical voltage and channel the current safely to the ground. Before the invention of the lightning rod, lightning claimed countless lives. In the mid-18th century, around 386 churches in Germany were struck by lightning, killing many people. Conditions elsewhere in the world were no better. For example, in Venice, lightning hitting the metal bells of several churches resulted in many deaths. At that time, people were terrified of lightning, but never thought of controlling it. They saw it as either divine punishment or a miracle sent from heaven. Lightning was considered an immensely powerful and inevitable phenomenon. Yet Franklin, relying on his scientific research, eventually convinced the people of Philadelphia to install lightning conductors on the roofs of tall buildings. After that, the dreadful, mystical lightning became a controllable natural event. Gradually, lightning rods appeared across Europe and the North American colonies. In recognition of this great achievement, Harvard University awarded Franklin an honorary degree in the summer of 1753. In addition, he received a gold medal from the Royal Society of London, becoming the first non-British person ever to earn that honor. A small beginning for a change as vast as history. Benjamin Franklin was a true reformer, and he proved it long before he entered the world of politics. While working at a printing house, Franklin founded an association called the Junto. Its members were his colleagues, tradesmen and craftsmen of the marketplace. In their small society, they discussed issues that could improve their own circumstances, as well as those of the people. Franklin's first association was essentially a network that helped many merchants advance their professions. For Franklin, this group was like a launching pad that allowed him to put his broader ideas into practice across the entire city and eventually the country. The first project Franklin implemented in his small club was the creation. It began when members of the association realized they needed to stand issues better. Franklin suggested that each member bring a few books and understand issue progressed. Franklin realized those books were insufficient. What they needed was a real library. A communal libraries of the junto, and even individuals outside it could join by paying a membership fee. The money collected was used to purchase new books for the library. Franklin's library started with 50 members and gradually grew to 100. Though it seemed simple. This was the first subscription libraries across the continent. One of their discussions concerned whether more paper money should be issued in the marketplace. Franklin's stance was positive. It could stimulate the economy and at the same time benefit his printing trade. He even wrote a printed essay on the subject titled, "A Modest Inquiry into the Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency." Franklin had reached serious analysis. Franklin had reached social awakening and understood the necessity of civic progress better than ever before. Most of the junto's rules were inspired by the charitable culture of Boston neighborhoods. One core rule stated that an idea was acceptable only if it was practical. Other principles emphasized diligence, curiosity, good temper, and the junto supported proper self-improvement and social values. Through these principles and study, Franklin began conceiving remarkable ideas for social progress: taxation, forming a volunteer fire brigade, and founding schools. These groundbreaking notions were first thought of by Franklin himself. Franklin's political journey began when he became the clerk of the assembly. He wanted to enter politics seriously and effectively because he believed that political participation could provide greater opportunities to promote public welfare and civic improvement projects. When Franklin entered politics, many streets in Philadelphia were still unpaved. The city was dusty and muddy. Residents had to wade through slime and dirt to reach the market. Franklin sympathized deeply with their hardship. He knew that going shopping in Philadelphia felt more like fighting against mud than performing a simple errand. That's when he had an ingenious idea. He made a deal with a poor man from Philadelphia. The man would clean the block twice a week and sweep the trash in front of each house. In return, each family would pay him 6 pence per month. Franklin promoted this plan by printing an announcement that read essentially that it was a low-cost idea with high benefit. Houses would become cleaner. People wouldn't have mud on their shoes. Store sales would improve because tidy shops attract more customers, and wind would no longer blow dust onto goods since a clean city meant less airborne dirt. Franklin distributed the pamphlet door to door and then went downtown to see how many families agreed to participate for 6 pence a month. To his surprise, everyone had signed up. After that, the streets surrounding the marketplace remained spotless, and residents were pleased with the transformation. But Franklin wasn't satisfied yet. He knew the city needed a larger overhaul. Some years later, he drafted a bill to pave Philadelphia's streets and successfully pushed it through the assembly. Following this achievement, Franklin was appointed Deputy Postmaster General by the British government. He founded the first home delivery system for letters improvements in postal service operations. Of course, these changes were never as easy as they appear on paper. At first, Franklin endured immense pressure to carry out reforms. He accumulated considerable debt, and it took at least 4 years before his revamped postal system turned profitable. Such minor changes might seem insignificant to many, yet Franklin believed that human happiness is achieved through small benefits that occur quietly, day by day. However, his spirit of reform extended beyond small matters. Franklin experienced a profound inner transformation regarding he recognized that the law must change. He played a crucial role in its abolition. Colors are not a measure of humanity. Before anything else, it's worth taking a moment in this booklight to learn more about slavery and its legal history in America. The truth is that slavery was brought to America by the British. After the colonization of North America by the British government, many English cultural habits, including slavery, spread throughout the region. For years, slavery seemed normal and natural in America, but after the end of the Civil War and the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, slavery was officially abolished. During that long period, opposition to slavery grew stronger day by day. Benjamin Franklin himself was among those who transformed from a supporter of slavery into a passionate advocate for its abolition. Through advertisements in his newspaper, he had made the buying and selling of enslaved people easier. This may contradict the image we have of Benjamin Franklin, but he even had several enslaved individuals in his home. Although Franklin later sold them, his decision was not originally based on moral opposition to slavery. Franklin first attacked the idea of slavery in one of his essays titled Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind. However, his criticism at that time was largely economic. He compared the costs and benefits of owning slaves, and concluded that keeping slaves was a loss-filled enterprise. Furthermore, he wrote that nearly every slave was inherently predisposed to theft. Franklin's true shift in perspective toward slavery occurred in the late 1750s. During that time, he joined an organization that established schools for black children. Through this involvement, Franklin came into close contact with black students and built relationships with them. It was then that he recognized the groundlessness of his prejudice. He discovered that black children learned quickly, possessed sharp memory, and were just as obedient and capable as white children in every respect. From that point on, he became one of the most significant figures in the movement to abolish slavery and worked tirelessly to promote the rights of black Americans. Even when deeply entangled in public battles over taxation, he never lost sight of the cause. In one essay, Franklin condemned in the strongest possible language the constant butchery of humankind, caused by this vile prejudice. In another, he identified one of Britain's greatest sins toward America as fostering the practice of slavery. In a letter to abolitionist supporters, he expressed hope that one day slavery would be permanently abolished by law. Franklin fought for abolition until the very last year of his life. In 1787, he became president of the abolition of slavery. The overarching goal of this society was not only to free enslaved people, but also to help them the living conditions of black Americans, and formally submitted a petition for the abolition of slavery to Congress. Unfortunately, this proposal was severely condemned by pro-slavery advocates and was soon defeated. Although Benjamin Franklin did not live to witness the complete abolition of slavery, his role in paving the way for that milestone is undeniable. Moreover, as a pioneer of social reform in America, he carried out numerous projects, all of which remain highly admirable in their own right. America becomes free. Benjamin Franklin was a charismatic politician, like a charming Hollywood actor endowed with broad knowledge and diplomatic skill. These qualities made Franklin a key figure in resolving America's crises. During Franklin's time, America was intensely unstable. Britain's domination over the occupied American lands grew stronger by the day. This angered the people and led to ever-increasing conflicts. The dream of freedom and independence spread more widely among the American population each day. Under this rising pressure, Americans formed an army to fight against Britain. The American leaders knew that to stand against Britain, they needed the support and alliance of a powerful nation, such as France. They had to send a representative to France, but the mission was extremely dangerous and complex. France was at peace with Britain at that time, which made it almost impossible to persuade the French to support Britain's colony. Eventually, Congress selected Franklin for this difficult task. Given his remarkable accomplishments in science and literature, Franklin was virtually the most famous and respected American known to the French. In truth, no one else in America was better suited for the job. Thus, in 1778, Benjamin Franklin, suffering from gout and kidney stones, crossed the ocean to France. Events unfolded exactly as Americans had hoped. The French celebrated Franklin's arrival in their country. The Americans already knew that negotiating with France on such a subject would be far from easy. But Franklin employed all his diplomatic skill for the cause. First of all, he tried to evoke the spirit of freedom within the French. Franklin told them that supporting America meant standing for liberty, independence, and humanity. Additionally, he translated and published in French the Pennsylvania Constitution and other inspiring documents he had written for America. Through these efforts, Franklin succeeded in gaining French support. He also tried to show that he valued France's national interests. Franklin emphasized to the French foreign minister that if France and its ally Spain joined forces with America, Britain would lose its colonies and possessions in the West Indies. That loss would severely damage England's economy, a prospect enticing to France which had long been Britain's rival. Later, Franklin used individuals he knew to be French spies to signal to the French government that America desired alliance with them. At last, in December 1777, France agreed to recognize the national identity of the United States, and both sides signed the Treaties of Alliance and Commerce. On March 20th, 1778, King Louis XVI officially ratified these treaties. All these achievements, Franklin's efforts. All these achievements, of course, were the result of Benjamin Franklin's America had ever achieved, one that greatly increased its chances of winning the awaited him. A greater challenge awaited him. As a master of diplomacy, Franklin had long understood that the only way to win negotiations was to be the stronger party. America's recent victory in its last battle against Britain empowered Franklin to negotiate confidently with other nations. America had been able to negotiate with France only after its triumph in the Battle of Saratoga. Now, with the decisive victory of the Franco-American coalition led by General Washington against Britain, Franklin could easily engage in peace talks with Britain. Peace negotiations between America and Britain. But Franklin, faced between America and Britain, had pledged not to negotiate with each other without France's coordination. Yet Britain wanted to reach peace through direct talks with America. Once again, America needed Franklin's diplomatic genius. He devised a brilliant plan, outwardly pretending to remain coordinated with France. He even took the British commissioner to Versailles to meet with the French foreign minister, demonstrating apparent harmony with the alliance. At the same time, he assured the British that the peace negotiations between the two countries would be completely private, direct, and mutually beneficial. Another fortunate event during this period was the rise of Shelburne as Britain's prime minister. Franklin seized the opportunity and without delay presented his peace proposal to Britain. Shelburne approved it. According to the plan, America would negotiate only if Britain recognized American independence. On October 5th, official talks between America and Britain began. The negotiation outline was almost identical to Franklin's earlier draft. With one additional stipulation, both Britain and America would enjoy equal navigation rights on the Mississippi River. On November 30th, 1782, one of the greatest and most decisive moments in American history, commissioners from both sides signed a preliminary treaty to take effect that proclaimed the United States free and independent. America owed this success more than to anyone else, to Benjamin Franklin. It was Franklin who, with clarity of vision and a measure of empathy, prepared the groundwork for the final negotiations and the end of the war. After the completion of the talks, Franklin returned home following 8 years of political activity abroad. Yet America, even after its independence, was still far from peace and stability. A few steps toward unity. After the signing of the Independence Treaty, the 13 American states were not yet united. At times, they even faced conflicts that approached chaos. Given the circumstances the country was experiencing, it was clear that America needed a new constitution. Therefore, political leaders decided to hold a constitutional convention to create a strong national government. Eventually, in the summer of 1787, diplomats and elites from all 13 states gathered in Philadelphia to work on the Constitution of the United States. Franklin was appointed as the representative of Pennsylvania. Since every state wanted to insist on its own opinions, positions, and interests, the convention lasted for 4 months. Interestingly, Benjamin Franklin was 81 years old at the time, twice the average age of the other members. Yet his spirit of enlightenment, tolerance, friendly character, and pragmatic attitude toward compromise made him a mediator among different factions. He taught them that to reach an agreement, both sides must give up some of their demands. The main disagreement at the convention was whether each state's votes in Congress should be proportional to its population or whether all states should have equal representation. Since the issue concerned each state's rights, debates became heated, and many members even threatened to break up the convention. Franklin, who had struggled for years to forge America into the United States, had no intention of letting the effort fail. So he acted once again. Owing to old age and illness, he asked another delegate to read aloud the remarks he had already written. Franklin's core idea was that members should consult rather than argue, and together offer mutual solutions. He believed everyone must voice their opinions, but also allow themselves time to cool their emotions before making a rational decision based on the collective views of all participants. Yet as temperatures rose and arguments flared again, the debate once more turned tense. This time Franklin proposed a practical solution. He said, it would be better if representatives responsible for taxation and public expenses were elected nationally by all the people. Moreover, each state should have several representatives in Congress. These representatives would be responsible for appointing high-ranking officers and handling governmental matters. The important point was that all states should have an equal number of representatives. Based on this plan, the convention considered the requests of all states, adjusted the details, and issued the final resolution. The innovative system of the U.S. Constitution and the exceptional freedom of this nation were in fact founded upon those very compromises and balances. After endless negotiations, an agreement was finally reached, and a national form of governance was established in America. Even today, this convention is remembered as blessed and a miracle of Philadelphia. Following the Constitutional Convention, formally retired from political life. Following the Constitutional Convention, who had fought for 84 years for human freedom. Benjamin Franklin. He did not witness the day when people use technology effortlessly, when most countries of the world are free, and when slavery and racial discrimination have become crimes across the globe. Nevertheless, the people of America will never forget the man who led the United States toward liberty and unity. Even now, more than 2 centuries after Franklin's death, when we look at the history of free America, we can trace his vivid footprint, from his negotiations with France and Britain to his mediation at the Constitutional Convention. The marks of the man whose image has smiled at Americans from $100 bills for nearly 2 centuries. Final words. Before all else, Benjamin Franklin was a pragmatic genius. He was a scientist as a child, an inventor as an adolescent, and a researcher as a young man. Even today, Franklin's contribution to the understanding of electricity cannot be overlooked. At another level, he was a reformer and a social activist. Looking at the long and historical struggle for the abolition of slavery, it is impossible for his name to be omitted. Ultimately, Franklin was a charismatic politician who fought wholeheartedly for America's freedom. Yet among all these, it must be said that Franklin was a tireless warrior. Whether the matter concerned science, society, or politics, Franklin fought for humanity for 84 years. In the end, it is fitting to close this booklight with the epitaph that Franklin himself wrote in his youth for his own tombstone. Here lies Benjamin Franklin, printer. Much like the cover of an old book, its pages torn, its words and embellishments faded. Here it rests to become food for worms. But the writing shall not be lost, for as he believed, he will one day appear again in a new edition, more perfect than before, revised and corrected by the author himself.